to worship with us and study. We're going to be in Numbers chapter 9 this morning. We'll cover chapter 10 also, but obviously we'll start at Numbers chapter 9. And the title and theme of our study through the book of Numbers is Wanderers. And today we will finally, I'm excited about this, we will finally get to chapter 10, where we will see the people begin to wander. Now we're calling it wanderers because they've come out of Egypt. As we will find out today, they've been out of Egypt for about a year. They're actually heading into their second year being out of Egypt. They've been hanging out at Sinai, the wilderness of Sinai, Mount Sinai, for a while. And we've been, those of you that have been with us, man, you've been trudging through Leviticus and through the beginning of Numbers, and all the instructions and all of the offerings and the animals, and we're, our minds are like, wait, what was, which animal goes with what? We have gotten through that, and we'll see some more of that, obviously. But we've gotten back now to chapter 10. We've gotten to the narrative. In other words, we're picking the story back up. And the people are going to see, as we'll see today, they'll start to move once again. And then once they start moving, here comes all the drama of the life, out in the wilderness, life with the Israelites. So we will see that this morning. We will move through chapter 9 fairly quickly, and then we will slow down in chapter 10. Let's pick it up at chapter 9. Those of you that take notes, these are the two main divisions. So in other words, it's split. The chapter is split up this way. Keeping the Passover. And then a little bit later, we will see the phrase, keeping charge of the Lord. And I'll explain what that means, keeping charge of the Lord. What does that mean? And so chapter 9 is all about keeping things. Now, the Passover was a feast or a holiday or a ceremony that God gave to the people when they were still in Egypt. In fact, it was their last night in Egypt. And he told them to celebrate this, what he called the Passover. Now, does anybody know, can anybody remember any of the details about Passover? Any of the elements, anything that was involved at all? Or the reason for it or any of that? Anybody? Okay, so no one's ever heard of the Passover before. This is good, because now you're going to learn. The Passover, isn't that funny? No one's ever heard of the Passover before. Yeah, I've been sitting in here for months hearing about it, but I've never heard about it before. So the Passover was, God gave them this feast the last night that they were in Egypt. And what he told them was that the angel of death was going to come through Egypt and was going to kill the firstborn of every family, every household, every home. And God said there's one way to protect yourself. And that way is to take a lamb. Had to be a certain age. And they had to raise that lamb for a certain amount of days. And then the family had to slaughter the lamb. If the family was too small for a lamb, they could actually split it between two families. But they were to partake or eat that lamb. But they were also to take some of the blood and put that on their doorway, the outside of their house, on the doorway, on the sides and on the top. And what would happen is that when the angel of death would come through, seeking out the firstborn from the family, the angel of death would see the blood of the lamb on the doorway and would pass over that house, not destroying anybody within that house. So they were saved by the blood of the lamb. I will mention this a few more times throughout our study this morning, but God has always been the same. Sometimes we think he was different in the Old Testament and he's different in the New Testament. In the Old Testament, he was mean and he had all kinds of rules and he was just so stringent. But in the New Testament, it's all about forgiveness and faith and it's all real easy. But that is not true at all. He has always operated on faith. We have always operated on faith. People have always operated on faith. Yes, it is true in the Old Testament, there were rules given, the Ten Commandments. There were lots of rules and guidelines. Some of you have been through those with me over the last several months, over the last year. We've heard all of those rules. But those rules were meant to teach and to guide and to govern the lives of the people of Israel. They were never meant to save them, just to govern their lives. They were to be in a relationship with God that was based on faith. We'll see that again today. But we saw that through the Passover. Really? My neighbor is going to lose their firstborn, but I won't, and the only difference is that I put blood from a lamb on my door? That's going to save me? That's faith. It seems like, well, that's silly, plus it's messy. Why would I want to mess up my door that way? But applying that blood was an act of faith on the part of the people, and so God responded to that faith. That is how God always responds, to faith. Not to the rules that we follow and the regulations that we stringently, stick to, but by faith. And so he's telling them here, I want you to keep the Passover. Look at verse 1. We'll read just a few verses here. Now the Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the first month of the second year after they had come out of the land of Egypt. So this is the first month of the second year after they've come out. So they've been out for a year, out of slavery for a year. Excuse me, now they're entering the second year. It's the first month. And he says in verse 2, let the children of Israel keep the Passover at its appointed time. So I want you to celebrate this Passover. So each family was responsible to take that lamb and to slaughter it and to eat of it. Okay? Verse 6, if you're taking notes, gives us our one subpoint in this section, and it is allowance. Let's read what's going on here. Verse 6. Now there were certain men, of course, if there was any kind of trouble, it had to start with men, right? Now there were certain men who were defiled by a human corpse. In other words, for some reason, they had come into contact with a dead body. We do not know why that is. Could have been that they just came across it and fell on it. I don't know. More like, my best guess is that one of their loved ones had probably died and they had to take care of the body. Like, what are we going to do here? We're going to bury this body. And so they had handled that body because it's two or multiple. Now, there were certain men. Okay, so it's in the plural. So, if it was one guy, tripped, he was going for a walk in the woods and tripped and fell on a dead body, that we could see is just one guy. But probably the fact that there were more than one man probably means that they were handling the body maybe for burial perhaps. But it says in verse 6 that they were defiled. They were made ceremonially unclean by coming in contact with this body so that they could not keep the Passover on that day. And they came before Moses and Aaron on that day. And those men said to him, we became defiled by a human corpse. Why are we kept from presenting the offering of the Lord? In other words, why are we kept from celebrating at its appointed time among the children of Israel? Verse 8, Moses said to them, stand still. That means relax, sit still, hold on. Verse 8, that I may hear what the Lord will command concerning you. So Moses doesn't just immediately pass judgment, like Pastor Chris would. Like, in the first place, why were you touching a dead body? Okay? That sounds like something that would happen at summer camp or something. Like, oh, sorry, Pastor Chris, that we were late for dinner. We found a dead body over there. Okay, so you touched a dead body, or what did you? It'd be like, what? They come to Moses, hey, we touched this dead body. We came into contact with it. So why are we not allowed to celebrate the Passover? So Moses speaks to God, and here's what happens in verse 9. Then the Lord spoke to Moses. He said this, speak to the children of Israel, saying, if any one of you or your posterity, your family, your relatives, is unclean because of a corpse, or is far away on a journey, he may still keep the Lord's Passover. On the 14th day of the second month at twilight, they may keep it. They shall eat it with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. They shall eat none of it until morning. So he says it's okay. If these people have become ceremonially unclean by touching a dead body, they can still celebrate the Passover. Okay? Or if I've traveled to some far country on business or maybe family business, who knows? My mom is sick and she's way out there and I got to go visit, but the Passover, what should I do? God says it's okay. You can still celebrate it where you're at. But in verse 13, but the man who is clean and is not on a journey and ceases to keep the Passover, that person shall be cut off from among his people. So, for the person that says, well, I was far away, or, I just didn't feel like celebrating the Passover, God says, this is a no-no. You'll be cut off. You'll be cut off from the people. You'll be cut off from God's blessing for doing that. You have to celebrate the Passover. And we think, well, who wouldn't want to celebrate the Passover? It's like you get some lamb chops and you gather together with your family and, you just have a good time. Like, what's the problem? But you know that there are always people who do not want to go along with the program, right? Every time you gather, even with God's people, there are people who are like, I don't really want to do that. I don't really want to go along with this. There's always somebody who wants to kind of do their own thing, go their own way. And God is saying, no. When you go to get ice cream, you choose whatever flavor you want, or don't get any. When it's time to, get a soda, you come to one of those machines, with all the different kinds of soda. I like those machines. And you hit your budget, pick whatever kind of soda you want. But God says, but when it comes to the feast, everybody has to celebrate. And God is adamant about that because he wants for everybody to remember. You'll notice that he mentioned earlier your posterity. In other words, your children and grandchildren and your children's grandchildren and all of them. What he wants is for the people to always remember what he did for them. I always want you to remember what I did for you. He goes on in verse 14 to say, and if a stranger lives among you and would keep the Lord's Passover, he must do so according to the rite of the Passover and according to its ceremony. You have the same ordinance for the people and for the strangers. So I like that. God even says, listen, if strangers show up and they want to celebrate the Passover, they can do that too. It's not like, no, you can't do that. You're not a Jew. You're not an Israelite. No. They can show up and they can actually celebrate also, because what that does is it gives the people an opportunity to share what God did. To say, hey, yeah, celebrate with us. Let us tell you what God did. Let us tell you why they had to eat the meal fully dressed. And you go, well, why wouldn't they? Well, because sometimes, probably last night, some of you may have eaten your dinner in your PJs. It may have been like, hey, Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening, kick back, no problem, play a little bit of video games or, text with my friends, watching some TV. Dinner time, you're just in your PJs. Like, not a big deal. Maybe you're just walking around barefoot or, just in your flip-flops and just hanging out. Well, God wanted the people to eat the Passover meal fully dressed, clothed, shoes on, sandals on, staff in the hand, belt on, get your coat. In other words, he wanted them to be ready to move. He said, listen, this is your last meal here in Egypt, and then you're going to be out. So you need to be fully dressed, ready to go. So when they celebrated it, they needed to do that same thing. They needed to be fully dressed. So, can you imagine, you have a guest over and, hey, why are you wearing your coat? Like, are we on our waist? Because you look like you're leaving. You're standing up eating with a staff in your hand. What are you doing? Oh, let me tell you. This is what God told us. And he told us to do X, Y, and Z. So it was an opportunity to share what God had done. Now, the second main division here in this chapter, in chapter 9, is verses 15 through 23. And it's keeping charge of the Lord. And really this whole section is summed up for us very easily in verse 23. Look at verse 23. At the command of the Lord, they remained encamped. And at the command of the Lord, they journeyed. Here's the phrase, they kept the charge of the Lord. At the command of the Lord by the hand of Moses. In other words, keeping charge of the Lord. What does that mean? It sounds like you're in charge of God. Like, has anybody seen God? No, sorry, I'm not on duty. Find somebody else. It's not keeping track of God. Well, in a sense it is, but what it was keeping an eye on God. Now, how do you keep an eye on God? Well, what that passage explains is that there was the presence of God was seen and known by a cloud. There was a cloud that would hang over the tabernacle. Pillar of cloud. It also mentions fire. Now we know from other places in the Bible that what they're talking about was there was a pillar of cloud that would be there to guide them. And at night there would be a pillar of fire to guide them. Sound crazy? Pretty wild. But that's how God would direct them. And what this portion of Scripture is saying is that the people needed to watch the cloud and watch the fire to see if it started to move. Because once it started to move, that meant that the people had to follow. Again, by faith. Everything. It's an act of faith. The cloud is moving. We need to follow it. Why? Because that's God. God's on the move. It's a cloud. I know. But that's representative of God. God's in the cloud. We've got to go. How strange is that? I think of this, and a little bit later we're told that they followed the Ark of the Covenant. I want you to think about this. There's millions of people in the camp. And let's say the cloud starts to move. So all these millions of people gather up their things, and they begin to move and follow the cloud. Now, can you imagine? I picture as there's millions of people going across the wilderness. Some people that live up in the mountains. And it's like, man, what is that down there? And they're looking like, oh man, there's millions of people. What are they doing? They're following a cloud. How strange is that? Isn't that a strange thing? That somebody would just follow a cloud? But it's an act of faith. Nobody else would follow a cloud. But because they understand that God is in the cloud, by faith, they follow that cloud. Or if it's at night, it would be a pillar of fire. So that's what that section is about, is that whenever God moves, you move. So when I move, you move. When I move, you move. Wherever God goes, they were to follow. It's a good lesson for you and I that we would keep our eyes on the Lord at all times. Sometimes we're not sure, like, where am I supposed to be going in life? That happens a lot in your teenage years. And it probably will not be the last time. I know a lot of young adults who think, where should I be going in life? Same thing, Christians, but where should I be going? And for those of you that, maybe you're a freshman, but you're hearing already, hey, college. Get into your sophomore year. Those of you that are sophomores or maybe just finished up, you're like, yeah, man, everybody's pushing for college. Those of you that are juniors, maybe you just finished up your junior year. Yeah, man, they're really, people are just pushing for college. Counselors like, hey, have you thought about college? What college are you going to apply to? Those of you that are going into your senior year, probably biting your nails down, just all the way down to the skin, man. Like, oh, it's the last year of high school. You didn't know it was going to go that fast. And it's just moving. And now all of a sudden this panic is setting in, and I'm not really, my senior year is coming up, and I don't really know what I'm supposed to be doing or where I'm going. Well, the key is to keep your eyes on the Lord. Where's the Lord going? Is the Lord going to Stanford? Then better get yourself to Stanford. Is the Lord going into the workplace? Well, then you better get yourself into the workplace. Is the Lord going to this school or that way or this direction? Is the Lord going to Bible college? Then you better get yourself to Bible college. Where is the Lord leading you? How are you supposed to know that? Well, what you do is you keep your eyes on the Lord. But here's the challenge. The challenge is, I don't have a cloud, Pastor Chris. If I had a cloud, and on the last day of high school graduation, I'm out there celebrating with my friends on the field, and then the cloud's moving. Sorry, guys, got to go. Got my bags packed. Okay, let's see where the clouds go. Oh, cloud's going to, Cal State or whatever. And okay, here, yep, now I know where I'm supposed to be. Now, we don't have that cloud. That would be nice, but we don't have that cloud. But what do we have? We have something better. We've got His Word. And the way that it works is that I spend time praying, God, what direction do you want to move me in? Where do you want me to go? And then I spend time looking at His Word because God is going to speak to us from what He's already spoken. So as I'm going through the Word and study, now it might be I'm on my own and I'm reading through Numbers chapter 10 at home, or it might be in church on a Sunday morning or a Wednesday night, or it might be through a Bible study that I'm listening to. But as I'm ingesting the Word of God, then what God does is He uses His Word to give me direction. And some of you might still be waiting, like, I'm not really hearing from the Lord. Well, you want to do one thing. You want to make sure that you're in the Word, that you're reading. Because that's how He's going to direct you. But maybe you're doing that and you're going, you know what, I still don't see anything clear, like I'm not really sure. Then here's what you do. You prayerfully proceed. You keep reading His Word and you prayerfully proceed. You prayerfully plan. Okay, Lord, I'm not hearing from you. That's okay. I'm going to make my plans. I'm going to go down to, SDSU, or I'm going to, make these plans to go start working, or, I'm not really sure where the Lord wants me to go. So, I'm going to go to the JC and just going to start taking some of the basic classes. And then you just pray. You just continue to pray and seek His Word. And when He's ready, boom, He'll give you direction. But one of the things that I've prayed over the years is, Lord, this morning as I get up, Lord, thank you so much for the day. Father, as I start to make my way to do things throughout the day, would you just direct me even when I don't know that you're directing me? See, because I don't necessarily need to know. Maybe it's just, God, direct my thoughts, direct my plans. As I'm making plans, you direct me, please. And then He's got free will to get in there and, guide my life. That's what I want to do. I don't want to just go off on my own, doing my own thing, making my own plans, because then what will happen is that road that leads you back here to church, to a counseling session with Pastor Chris. And then I go, well, have you been praying about these things? Well, no, not really. Have you been reading the Word to find direction? No, didn't do that either. Okay. So you're making your own plans. You don't want to do that. Here's what you want to do. So I'm giving you the secret right now. That as you're heading through high school and everybody's pressuring college or job or career or Bible college, all the different things, Lord, through all the clutter, through all the noise, what do you want to do, God? What do you want to do? You never know. God might want you to do something crazy. Go somewhere, do something. I don't know. But the lesson is the children of Israel had to keep their eyes on the cloud. I want to keep my eyes on God, on God's Word, through His Word. Okay? We move into Numbers chapter 10. Numbers chapter 10, there are two main divisions, making of the trumpets and then moving from Sinai. In verse 1, the Lord spoke to Moses and He said, make 2 silver trumpets for yourself. You shall make you shall make them of hammered work. You shall use them for calling the congregation and for directing the movement of the camps. And we see in verses 3 through 4 that these 2 trumpets were to be used for, wait a minute, where to go? Right there, for meetings. Verses 3 and 4. When they blow both of them, all the congregation, that's all the people, shall gather before you at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. But if they blow only one, then the leaders, the heads of the divisions of Israel, shall gather to you. So see, these trumpets were made for moving things, moving people, really. He says, if they blow both trumpets, everybody in the camp knows they need to come to the tabernacle. There's a meeting. But if they blow just one, then we need just the leaders. They were used as a means of communication. There was millions of people in the camp. Millions of people. Some of you have played the telephone or the telegram game, where I go over here and I whisper something to Jaden, like, hey, the lady was wearing a yellow dress and went to the store and bought the newspaper. Pass it on. And then Jaden passes it on to Zeke, Conric, and then he passes it on. And by the time it gets through the class, it gets way over here and it's a completely different message. How many of you have done that before? Okay, you've had some experience with that, right? So can you imagine millions of people? And Moses goes, hey, listen, I want you to go spread the word that, we need to meet at the tabernacle in 20 minutes. By the time everybody finds out about it, 3 days later, forget about it, right? Well, you know what? I thought there was, I thought you said we were meeting out at that cactus over there on, on Thursday or something. And it's like the message is all messed up. But with these horns, they blow these trumpets. Boom. Everybody knows. Oh, I hear 2 trumpets. Let's go. Or I hear just one. That's just the leaders. Okay? Now, they were also used for moving. Look at verse 5. When you sound the advance, the camps that lie on the east side shall then begin their journey. That means it's time to move. The advance. I do not know. It was a different kind of sound that came out of them. Okay? But when they heard that, the camps that were on the east side shall then begin their journey. When you sound the advance the second time, then the camps that lie on the south side shall begin their journey. They shall sound the call for them to begin their journeys. And when the assembly is to be gathered together, you shall blow but not sound the advance. The sons of Aaron, the priests, shall blow the trumpets, and these shall be to you as an ordinance forever throughout your generations. So these horns were made for communication, for the calling, for the moving of people. Verse 9, they even used them for military here. When you go to war in your land against the enemy who oppresses you, then you shall sound an alarm with the trumpets. And you will be remembered before the Lord your God, and you will be saved from your enemies. Now, this is a little unsettling here. As we read through it, we just kind of go through like, all right, just do our reading, let's move on. But I want you to see what he says there. He says, when you get to the land, the promised land, and there are enemies there that oppress you. You understand what he's saying? You see, all this time, he's been promising the children of Israel, I'm leading you to a land flowing with milk and honey. It's a promised land. And it sounds like heaven on earth. Everything that they need will be there. It'll be their own special land. They've never had that before. But now, they find out that when they get there, there will actually be enemies there who want to oppress them. You need to understand something here. Let me back up for you and give you the big picture. As God is leading the children out of Egypt, there's a grand picture going on here. And it is this. There's a picture of salvation. They were saved from Egypt. They went through the sea. Remember that? They were baptized. And now what they're doing is in the wilderness of Sinai. We'll see them in Paran in a little bit. As they're making their way toward the promised land, it's not a picture of them making their way toward heaven. What it is it's a picture of the life of faith, with its wilderness times and its times of community with God. That's what it is. It's a picture of the life of faith. Coming out of Egypt, that's a picture of them. They're already saved. They belong to God. They're God's people. Understand this, that even living a life of faith, like what many of you are doing, or like many of us are doing, you know that things are not always going to be easy, right? And do you know that there are even going to be times when people will not like you? In fact, there will be times when people especially will not like you because you're a Christian. It's getting to be that way. I don't know what your circle of friends is like, or your school or family or whatever, but in society there are large segments of people that do not like us because of what we're doing right now, because of what we believe. There are people that don't like us. They don't even know us, and they don't like us. I think you're all a bunch of sweet people. But there are people that because we're reading the Bible, because we're in church, because we're worshiping, they automatically do not like us. And we go, man, I didn't even do anything to you. But that is always going to be. There's always going to be somebody that doesn't like me. That's kind of hard for some of us. Some of us are very, very, very concerned about that stuff. Like, I just want everybody to like me. Listen, relax. Not everybody's going to like you. Why? I don't know. Sometimes people are just weird. Or they're just mean. Or they're just hateful. And it might be the fact that you're a Christian. Oh, Christian, I don't like you. But you don't even know me. I know, but I know you read your Bible or you go to church. I don't like you. Or it might just be that they don't like your hair. Or it may just be that they don't like your style of music. Or it may be that they don't like the way that you run cross country. Or it just could be that they don't like your shoes. Why do you wear those shoes? What are those? What are those? You never know. It could be anything. There are just some people that are just not going to like you. You need to understand that. Now, the lesson here is that they're going into the promised land. They're living this life of faith, man. They're going with God. But there are still going to be people there that do not like them. They're still going to have enemies. But I want you to notice this in verse 9. Remember, we're talking about these trumpets. Here's what God says. When you go to war in your land against the enemy who oppresses you, Then you shall sound an alarm with the trumpets, and you will be remembered before the Lord your God, and you will be saved from your enemies. You hear what God said? He says, you get into trouble, you get enemies that are wanting to oppress you, sound the alarm, sound the trumpets, and you will be remembered before the Lord your God, and you will be saved from your enemies. Now this doesn't, I don't really like this. Because if somebody comes up and they're like threatening me, hey, we're going to oppress you, we're going to hurt you, we're going to kill you, we're going to harm you. And I go to blow a trumpet, I would feel like a sissy. Like somebody's threatening me, and I back off and I play my instrument. That doesn't sound right. But I want you to understand, again, like I told you a few minutes ago, that we're operating by faith. We do not handle problems and situations and challenges the same way that my friend at school does, or that my neighbor does, or that my uncle does. I don't handle things the same way. I handle things the way that God wants me to handle them. And when I'm having an issue or a problem, while there may be times with somebody that's trying to oppress me where I have to physically defend myself, that shouldn't be my first resort. There are certain situations, come out of a restaurant and somebody randomly attacks you, you got to fight them off. I'm not saying that. But when I'm having an issue with somebody, the very first thing that I want to do is I want to respond by faith. I respond by faith to everything as a Christian. And the first thing that I'm going to do is I want to pray by faith. Somebody's threatening me. You want me to pray? Yeah. That's how we respond to things. Here he's telling them, you get into the land, you're going to have enemies there that want to oppress you, and they come and try to attack you. This is what I want you to do. I want you to blow the horn and then leave it alone. What? But they're coming to attack my family. I know. Blow the horn and then leave it alone. And then he says in verse 9, you will be remembered before the Lord your God, and you will be saved from your enemies. There's a promise attached to that. That you act out by faith. Activate your faith, God says. You blow the trumpet, and then stand back, because I'll remember you, and I will protect you. You will be saved from your enemies. It's an act of faith. That is always how God has always operated that way. He's always operated that way. By faith. Verse 10 tells us about memorials. Let's look at it. Verse 10. Also in the day of your gladness and your appointed feasts, and at the beginning of your months, you shall blow the trumpets over your burnt offerings and over the sacrifices of your peace offerings. And they shall be a memorial for you before your God. I am the Lord your God. So at the start of your feasts, blow the trumpets. Before you give offerings, blow the trumpets. To signify to everyone at the beginning of the months, as your festivals are coming up, blow the trumpets. That way everybody knows, everybody's on the same page. Everybody's got their attention. Oh, we're blowing the trumpets. Forgot. Now everybody's on the same page. Okay? It's like at the beginning of worship when Matt Perry says, hey, let's all stand. And then we all, there's a call to word. Okay, let's all stand up. Right? If he doesn't tell us, we don't know what to do. Right? It's like, are we supposed to stand? Should we stand? No, we shouldn't stand. Or it's okay to stand, but just don't be the first one. I don't know. But there's this call to worship. Here, there's this call. This is what I want you to do at the beginning, and this is the blowing of the trumpets. Okay? Now, finally we get to the part that I have been anticipating for such a long time now, and that is the moving from Sinai. Because right here we get back to the narrative. Some of you may remember the golden calf from a long time ago. Remember, they made a golden calf and they were worshiping and partying. And there was thunder and lightning on the mountain and a cloud. All these fantastic things. Well, and then after that, we got the 10 Commandments. And then we got we got all of Leviticus, all the rules, all the, this is how you do it. This is what you build. This is all the instructions. Well, now we're back to the narrative. In other words, we're back to the telling of the story. And here in verse 11, what we're going to see is, first of all, the initiating of the move. Verse 11. Now it came to pass on the 20th day of the second month, in the second year, that the cloud was taken up from above the tabernacle of the testimony. So let me ask you a trick question here. Right there in verse 11, it says that the cloud moved from above the tabernacle of the testimony. When the cloud moves, what is supposed to happen? Anybody?
They follow.
Jaden, yes. You just saved the whole class right now. Because I was actually going to go back to chapter 9 and say, let's start over. Wasn't that hard? The cloud moves, the people move. Okay? Simple. Cloud moves. And here in verse 11, we're told that the cloud was taken up from above the tabernacle. In other words, time to go. Verse 12. And the children of Israel set out from the wilderness of Sinai on their journey. Here they go. Time to move. Then the cloud settled down in the wilderness of Paran. So they started out for the first time according to the command of the Lord by the hand of Moses. So the move is initiated, and now what we see is that Israel follows. Real simple. Verse 14. The standard of the camp of the children of Judah. The standard. That means their banner. They had banners, large banners. Millions of people. The banner goes up, and they know, oh, fusion's moving. Everybody gather up your stuff, time to go. Let's roll. The standard of the camp of the children of Judah set out first according to their armies. So notice, the armies got up and moved first. They didn't send out the women and children first. Sent out the armies. Verse 15, over the army of the tribe of the children of Issachar was Nathanael. They give us the leaders. Verse 16, over the army of the tribe of the children of Zebulun. And then in verse 17, look at this. So these tribes moved out. Cloud starts moving. The tribes move out in order. Verse 17, then the tabernacle was taken down, and the sons of Gershon and the sons of Merari set out carrying the tabernacle. You got that? So certain specific tribes move out. Then after those specific tribes, next in line was the tabernacle. Let's go. Let's take down the tabernacle, the curtains, the rods, the walls, all of the different pieces, and let's move the tabernacle behind those tribes. And so here they go. They're all moving. Then in verse 18, the standard of the camp of Reuben. So now Reuben sets out. So those tribes go first, then the tabernacle. Now here comes Reuben in verse 18. And in verse 19, over the army of the tribe of the children of Simeon was Shemuliel. So you have the tribe of children of Simeon. Verse 20, of the children of Gad. Then in verse 21, here's something different. Then the Kohathites set out, carrying the holy things, and were given in parenthesis there that the tabernacle would be prepared for their arrival. So you had one group that took the parts of the tabernacle, the curtains, the rods, the pegs, the screens, the walls, everything. Took all of those things, took it all down, packed it all up, put it on their shoulders, and started moving in the direction of the cloud. Then you have a separate group right here, the Kohathites, family of Kohath, who they were responsible for carrying the holy things from the tabernacle. Does anybody remember what the holy things in the tabernacle were? Anybody? Yeah, what were they? No? Sorry. Were you raising your hand?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Ark of the Covenant.
Ark of the Covenant was a big one, and we'll see that in just a moment. Anybody remember anything else? Anybody? Okay. Ark of the Covenant. There was a lamp. There was a table of showbread. There were the things for burning incense in there. So all of those things were in there. And the Kohathites are responsible for transporting these things. And they go behind because the tabernacle goes first, then gets set up, and then they come in with the articles and go inside and set them up. And then it says this in verse 22, the standard of the camp of the children of Ephraim went. Then in verse 23, Manasseh. Verse 24, Benjamin. And then everybody's favorite in verse 25, at the very end, the tribe of Then the standard of the camp of the children of Dan, the rear guard of all the camps. They put him at the very back. Do you think that's because of his name? Dan? No. Dan. Manasseh. Ephraim. Dan. But they put him way at the back. He goes last. And it says in verse 25 that they set out according to their armies. Over their army was Ahiezer, the son of Ammishaddai. Over the army of the tribe of the children of Asher, verse 26. And verse 27, Naphtali. And then finally in verse 28, thus was the order of march of the children of Israel according to their armies when they began their journey. Everything was in order. Everything was in order. This tribe went first, this tribe went next. That's how God had set it up. He's a God of order. And then in verse 29, we have this interesting little passage, inviting Hobab. You go, who's Hobab? I'm so glad that you asked. Verse 29. Now Moses said to Hobab, the son of Ruel, the Midianite, Moses' father-in-law. So this guy was the son of Moses' father-in-law and Ruel the Midianite. Okay, so this guy Hobab. Here's what Moses says in verse 29. We are setting out for the place of which the Lord said, I will give to you. In other words, we're going to the promised land, Hobab. And he says, come with us, and we will treat you well. For the Lord has promised good things to Israel. Okay, so who's Hobab? Why is Moses inviting him? Verse 30. And he said to him, this is Hobab, he says, I will not go, but I will depart to my own land and to my relatives. No, not going with you guys. Promised land sounds really neat, but I'm going back to my own land and I'm going back to my own family. You guys are leaving Sinai now. No thanks. But Moses said in verse 31, please do not leave, inasmuch as you know how we are to camp in the wilderness, and you can be our eyes. So it seems like this guy Hobab is being invited to go with them because he knows his way around the wilderness. It might be that this guy Hobab is familiar with the wilderness. He knows how to camp. Maybe he's like an outdoorsman, you know. Maybe he knows how to set up tents, knows how to catch certain animals. No, don't eat that plant. You know, it'll mess up your stomach. No, don't drink that water because that water is bad. Whatever. It sounds like he knows the wilderness. And so Moses is inviting him, come along. There's a great lesson in here, and it is this, that yes, we have the Lord to direct us, but there is also wisdom and godly counsel. Talking to people along the way, and you guys are about to get a little bit of information that I didn't give to the first service, so consider yourself privileged, okay? And don't go tell them. Some people were in the first service, and they're in here right now, and so they're going to know that I like you better, okay? I'm just kidding. I don't like you better. Anyways, I'm just kidding. Listen, there are people in your life that God has given you that know things. Most notably, parents. Or maybe even grandparents. Maybe it's an aunt or an uncle, maybe it's an older sibling. People that can give you wisdom. And what we are finding more and more often what's happening is that young people, they don't want to listen to their parents. Because, what do you guys know? You were born when you were 50. You were never even a teenager. Or you know, when you were a teenager, whatever, you used to ride a T-Rex to school. You don't know nothing, you know. You don't know nothing about this kind of stuff. Please, please. You have been given people in your life that can help give you wisdom. And you might be cheating yourself by not listening to them. You may be ripping yourself off, trying to just navigate through life on your own like these older people, they don't know what they're talking about. They know what they're talking about. Every single time? No, not every single time. but they can give you principles to use. Even when they don't know the answer or know what you should or shouldn't do, they can give you principles. If you've got a godly mom or a godly dad, they can give you some principles. Well, you know what? I don't really know what you should do, but what we should do is pray. I know that. And maybe what you should do is, maybe you should, make this decision or make that decision, and they can help you navigate through life. And if you have this mentality of, nobody really knows, please, what do you know about drugs? What do you know about alcohol? Please. There have always been drugs and alcohol. Well, what do you know about, sexual matters? Please. It's always been a problem, always been an issue. It's nothing new. You might be, experiencing it maybe in a different way or whatever. It's, might be a little bit different, but it's the same stuff. What was it that Solomon said? There's nothing what under the sun? What did he say? Anybody? You're like, who's Solomon? He's this guy in the Bible. There's nothing new under the sun. Solomon said there's nothing new under the sun. He said vanity of vanities. All is vanity. Solomon, richest man that ever lived, or at least during that time, wisest man that ever lived, he experienced all of life. Everything that life had to get to offer and to give. And he said vanity of vanities. All is vanity. He says it's just all the same stuff. It just goes in a circle. That's all it does. So if you're looking at older people in your family or in your life, like your parents, and like, oh, they don't know nothing, please take a lesson from Moses. Moses says, listen, you have some experience with this. Why don't you come with us? And Hobab says, no, I'm not going. He says, no, listen. Come with us. In verse 31, you know how we are to camp in the wilderness. You can be our, come with us. You know what you're doing. It's good to have that wisdom, people around you that can offer you that wisdom and help guide you and direct you. Verse 32 says, and it shall be, he tells him, if you go with us, he's enticing him here, indeed it shall be that whatever good the Lord will do to us, the same we will do to you. Come with us, we'll hook you up. Verse 33, so they departed from the mountain of the Lord, Mount Sinai, on a journey of 3 days. 3 days. 3 days. Now, here's what we're doing. Here's a little mistake we're making. We're all like, oh, if I was on this journey, yeah, okay, it would be so cool, 3 days camping, journeying. And what we're thinking is, we're thinking of this room right here, beautiful, healthy, strong, young people. But remember that you're making this journey with your grandma. Imagine that. Or your granddad with his bad knees. And you're trying to get across the wilderness, oh man, my back's hurting or whatever. Or maybe you're a young mom and you've got this brand new little baby. And you're trying to hey man, I'm tired of carrying this baby here. You carry whatever and you trade off and whatever else. But I mean, it would have been a difficult journey. We think about the romanticism of it all, traveling with God through the wilderness and 3 days. Oh, this would be so cool. Yeah, until you had to, take care of, your little baby brother or baby sister, carry him for 3 days, or you had to help your grandma get across the wilderness or whatever. It would have been tough. And look at this in verse 33. And the ark of the covenant of the Lord went before them for 3 days' journey to search out a resting place for them. And the cloud of the Lord was above them by day when they went out from the camp. So it was, we'll get to verse 35 in just a moment. But I want you to get this picture in your mind. The ark of the covenant, which was where God said, he says, you build this thing and my presence will be there in between these two angels on the ark of the covenant, this box that they had, this golden box. It sounds really cool, but I want you to think about this. Again, there's millions of people traveling through the wilderness, through the desert. And imagine that there's some people that live up in the mountains, and they spot something way down there. It's like, oh man, what's going on? And they're concerned and they're looking and they're like, what are these people doing? It's like, man, there's millions of people down there. Really? What are they doing? They're following a box. Isn't that crazy? They're following a box. The box was leading them because that was the presence of the Lord. They understood that, but the people that were watching, they don't know. They're following a box. Really? Yeah. How strange that must have seemed. It's just as strange as people on a Sunday morning at 11:30, they're all, I don't know, they're all gathering into that room over there, that little building. What are they doing? They're reading a book. Really? Is that it? Yeah. They're just sitting down, looking at some guy in a stupid shirt, and they're just reading a book. Why would they be doing that? Don't know. Or they actually are in that room reading a book, and they think that that book is going to change their lives. How strange we must look to people. Why would they be doing that? They could be at a, whatever the hot wings place. What is the place called? Buffalo Wild Wings. Whatever. What's that? Wingstop. Buffalo Wild Wings. Or they. Why would they? Why aren't they over there watching sports and eating wings? They're in a room reading a book that they think is going to change their lives. That's really weird. What a strange thing. You see, but for us, but for you and I, we understand. We understand, just like the people understood, well, God is on that box. That's the presence of God for us. We understand that God is in this book. This is the presence of God. And we go to this book and we read it. And the fact is that there have been times in our lives where we've read it and God has used it to speak to us and to change us. So we understand. We gather here every single Sunday, every single Wednesday. Every time we get together to read the Bible, it's by faith. We're exercising faith. We come here, we read this ancient text and believe that God's going to use it to guide us and to direct us. Same thing with the children of Israel. They're following this box across the wilderness. And that is because that is the chosen symbol for God's presence. That's what he said. He said, you build this box, I'll dwell right there, I'll live right there. And as it starts to move out, here's what Moses would say in verse 35. Rise up, O Lord, let your enemies be scattered, and let those who hate you flee before you. And when it rested, when it stopped, he would say, return, O Lord, to the many thousands of Israel. But he's basically saying, as the children of Israel, as the Ark of the Covenant begins to move, they're carrying it, the presence of the Lord is going to find them a spot. It's by faith. By faith. He's saying, Lord, bless the way. Find us a spot. Find us a good camping place. A place that we can set up, camp. It's the same type of thing that we do here. When Matt Perry gets up and he says, hey, let's all stand for worship. Okay, stand for worship. Same type of thing. Lord, you're moving. Bless the move. Let your enemies be scattered. Make a way for us. Bless this. It's by faith. We always operate by faith, not by rules and regulations. Those things help us govern our lives, direct us, but we're always in this relationship with God by faith. Father, thank you so much for this morning.